The great crystal spires of the Mist civilization trembled as another quake shook their world. In the highest tower of their capital city, Elder Ray watched through transparent walls as cracks spread across the ground below. His crystalline form shimmered with worry as he turned to face the Council of Elders. "The core is failing faster than we predicted," he said, his voice carrying the musical tone typical of his species. "We have perhaps 3 months before our planet tears itself apart." The council chamber, usually bright with the natural glow of its inhabitants, had grown dim with their collective fear. The Mists, a species that had lived peacefully for thousands of years, now faced extinction. Their bodies, made of living crystal that caught and reflected light in beautiful patterns, seemed to pulse with anxiety. Elder Tom, the youngest of the council, moved forward. Unlike the others, his crystalline form still shone brightly. "We must try again," he insisted. "Surely one of the advanced species will help us." The emergency transmission center hummed with activity as the Mists sent out their 7th distress call in as many days. Their message was simple: a peaceful species needed help evacuating their dying world. They had the resources to pay for assistance. They only needed ships and safe passage. The first response came from the Arbiters, beings of pure energy who controlled most of the galaxy's trade routes. "We regret to inform you that intervention would violate our policy of natural development. Your planet's core instability is a natural phenomenon. We wish you well." Next came the Mechanicals, a species that had long ago transferred their consciousness into massive ships. "The cost-benefit analysis does not support intervention. We suggest acceptance of the inevitable." One by one, the great powers of the galaxy declined to help. Some cited policies. Others claimed technical difficulties. A few didn't even bother to respond. The Mists, who had always believed in the unity of intelligent life, found themselves alone. In the council chamber, Elder Ray slumped in his crystalline seat. "Perhaps we should accept our fate," he whispered, his glow fading to almost nothing. But Elder Tom refused to give up. He moved to the communications array, adjusting it to scan for any sign of intelligence they might have missed. The device swept through space, picking up random signals from countless stars. Then it caught something. A pattern. A repeating signal. "Elders," Tom called out, his crystal form brightening with excitement. "I'm detecting organized radio waves from a system we've never contacted." The council gathered around the display. The signals were primitive by galactic standards. Simple radio waves carrying music and voices. They traced them to a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. "They're not even a space-faring civilization," Elder Ray noted, hope fading again. "They couldn't help us if they wanted to." But Tom had already started analyzing the signals. "Look at this. In just the last 100 years, they've gone from primitive combustion engines to walking on their moon. Their technological growth is exponential." He played some of their transmissions. Stories of their people helping each other during disasters. News reports of nations coming together to save trapped miners. Documentaries about their doctors traveling to help other communities in need. "They call themselves humans," Tom explained. "And they seem to have something the advanced species have lost. They help each other, even strangers, even when it's difficult." "They're too primitive," another elder argued. "They barely understand space travel." "But they understand compassion," Tom countered. "In all our calls for help, isn't that what we really need?" The chamber fell silent as the elders considered this. Another quake shook the building, making their decision more urgent. Finally, Elder Ray spoke. "Send them a message. Make it simple, something their technology can understand. If they're as compassionate as their broadcasts suggest, maybe they'll at least try to help." Tom moved to the transmitter, his crystal form glowing with renewed hope. As he prepared the message, he watched their planet's surface crack a little more. They had no guarantee these humans would help or even understand their message. But right now, hope was all they had. The message was sent, traveling across the vast distance of space toward the little blue planet. The Mists waited, their world crumbling around them, hoping these primitive but caring beings would do what the advanced species would not: answer a call for help. The message from space arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. At first, the radio astronomers at the Global Space Center thought it was just another routine signal. But this one was different. It repeated in clear, mathematical patterns that could only be artificial. "Get Director Wilson," one of the technicians said, his hand shaking as he adjusted his headphones. Now. Within hours, every major space agency on Earth was studying the signal. It carried simple images and basic mathematical concepts, but its meaning was clear. Someone out there needed help. The first signs of panic started when the massive crystal ship appeared in orbit. It seemed to shimmer like a diamond in the sunlight, nearly invisible until it caught the light just right. Military forces worldwide went on high alert, but the ship made no aggressive moves. It simply waited. In the United Nations emergency session, Director Wilson stood before the world's leaders. "The message is a distress call," she explained, pointing to the decoded images. "Their planet is dying. They're asking for help evacuating their people." "How do we know this isn't a trick?" one leader demanded. "They could be invaders. They parked a ship that could probably destroy us right above our heads." Director Wilson replied, "If they wanted to attack, they already would have." After hours of debate, humanity made its decision. They would help. Captain John Reed stood in the airlock of the International Space Station, watching as the crystal ship extended a transparent bridge toward them. His heart pounded, but his voice remained steady as he spoke into his radio. "This is humanity's first official greeting. We're ready to receive our guests." The being that emerged from the ship took everyone's breath away. It looked like a walking crystal, catching and reflecting light in beautiful patterns. It moved with fluid grace, its form shifting slightly with each step. "I am Elder Tom of the Mists." It spoke in perfect English, having learned the language from Earth's broadcasts. "We thank you for receiving us." The meeting that followed was broadcast to every corner of Earth. Humans watched in awe as Elder Tom explained their situation, how their planet's core was becoming unstable, how they had asked other, more advanced species for help, and how all had refused. "We have little time," Elder Tom said. "Our world will not survive another 3 months. We know you are a young species, that your technology is still developing. But you were the only ones who answered our call." Captain Reed looked at the data they had shared. The challenges seemed impossible. The mists needed specific atmospheric conditions to survive. Their crystal bodies were fragile in certain temperatures. The logistics of moving an entire civilization seemed overwhelming. But then he remembered something from his childhood, how his small town had come together to save a family trapped in a mine collapse. Everyone had helped, whether they knew the family or not. They worked for days, refusing to give up. "We'll help you," Reed said firmly. "We may not have the fanciest ships or the most advanced technology, but we're good at solving problems. We'll find a way." Elder Tom's crystalline form brightened noticeably. "The other species said we were asking the impossible." Reed smiled. "Humans are pretty good at doing the impossible." Within days, the greatest minds on Earth were working on the problem. Engineers from every nation collaborated on converting cargo ships into temporary habitats. Scientists studied the mists' biology to understand their needs. Even private companies offered their resources and expertise. When news arrived that another alien ship had entered the solar system, everyone tensed. It was one of the arbiters, the advanced species that had refused to help the mists. "We have come to observe," the arbiter's message stated. "Your species attempts what we deemed impossible. We doubt you will succeed." Captain Reed shared a look with Elder Tom before responding. "Watch closely then. You might learn something about what's possible when people decide to help each other." As the first modified ships began their test runs, humanity faced its greatest challenge yet. They had just weeks to save an entire civilization using technology that was centuries behind the rest of the galaxy. But looking at the hope in Elder Tom's crystalline form, they knew failure wasn't an option. The impossible rescue mission was about to begin. Dr. Mary Cole hadn't slept in 2 days, but she couldn't stop now. In her lab at the Global Science Center, she studied the holographic display showing a mist's crystal structure. Behind her, Elder Tom floated in a specially designed chamber, helping her understand how their bodies interacted with different atmospheres. "The problem isn't just moving your people," she explained, rubbing her tired eyes. "It's keeping you alive during the journey. Your bodies need a very specific mix of gases." The Arbiter Observer, a being of pure energy contained in a sleek metallic shell, watched from the corner. "Your primitive understanding of atmospheric science makes this task impossible," it stated flatly. Mary ignored the comment, focusing instead on her readings. She had learned long ago that the word impossible usually meant we haven't figured it out yet. In the ship construction facility next door, Chief Engineer Bill Porter and his team worked on converting Earth's largest cargo vessels into temporary homes for the mists. The challenge was enormous. They needed to create perfect atmospheric conditions inside massive ships that were never designed for such precise control. "The conventional systems won't work," Bill muttered, looking at the failed simulation results. "We need something different, something new." That's when he noticed his coffee mug, the one with the small crack that he kept meaning to replace. The coffee never spilled because the crack had sealed itself with coffee residue. He picked it up, studying it carefully. "What if we're thinking about this wrong?" He suddenly called out to his team. "Instead of fighting to maintain one big atmosphere, what if we let the ships develop their own microenvironments?" The idea spread quickly through the facility. They began designing a new type of hull coating, one that would react to atmospheric leaks by automatically sealing them, just like Bill's coffee mug. It wasn't high technology like the Arbiters used, but it might just work. Meanwhile, in orbit, Captain Reed oversaw the modification of the first rescue ship. The vessel's holds were being lined with crystalline structures similar to the Mist's homeworld, designed to help them feel comfortable during the journey. "Your solutions are unusual," Elder Tom observed, watching the work through a viewing port. "No other species would think to solve problems this way." "That's because they've forgotten how to improvise," Reed replied. "When you have all the answers, you stop looking for new ones." The Arbiter's ship continued to broadcast messages of doubt to the galaxy. More advanced species arrived to observe what they called the primitive rescue attempt. Their ships filled Earth's orbit, their crews watching and waiting for the humans to fail. But humanity didn't have time for their judgment. The clock was ticking, and the reports from the Mist's homeworld grew worse each day. In her lab, Mary finally had a breakthrough. "Look at this," she called to Elder Tom, pointing at her latest test results. "Your bodies don't just need the right gases, they create them. You're part of your own atmosphere." This discovery changed everything. Instead of trying to perfectly recreate the Mist's atmosphere, they could help the crystalline beings generate their own. It was like giving them the ingredients to bake their own bread, instead of trying to keep pre-baked bread fresh. The first full test came 3 days later. A small group of Mist volunteers entered the prototype habitat. Everyone watched anxiously as the atmospheric readings stabilized. "It's working," Mary whispered, watching the numbers hold steady. "It's actually working." The Arbiter Observer moved closer to the display. "This solution lacks elegance. It is crude and basic. But it works," Bill replied with a tired smile. "Sometimes that's all that matters." As news of the successful test spread, hope began to grow. They had solved one of the biggest challenges, but time was running out. The Mist's planet was breaking apart faster than expected, and they still had to figure out how to transport millions of crystal beings across space safely. But looking at the determination on the faces around her, Mary knew they would find a way. Humans always did. "Tell the construction teams to start full-scale production," Captain Reed ordered. "We're ready to begin the real work." The race to save the Mists was entering its most critical phase, and humanity was just getting started. The first rescue fleet launched on a cold morning in December, 20 converted cargo ships, now gleaming with their new protective coatings, rose from Earth's surface on columns of fire. Each vessel carried hope, determination, and enough supplies to sustain thousands of crystalline refugees. In the lead ship's control room, Commander Kate Walker gripped her chair as the vessel shuddered through the atmosphere. "Status report," she called out, her voice steady despite the vibrations. "All systems holding," her engineer replied. "The new hull coating is working exactly as designed. Basic, but effective." The Arbiter's ship swept alongside them as they reached orbit, its energy form pulsing with what seemed like amusement. "Your vessels are surprisingly intact," it transmitted, "though you still have to cross the void between stars. A much greater challenge awaits." Kate switched off the transmission. They had more important things to worry about than alien criticism. According to the latest reports, the Mist's planet had maybe 2 weeks left before total collapse. The fleet assembled in high orbit, their formation practiced countless times in simulation. Elder Tom stood on the bridge beside Kate, his crystalline form dimming with concern as he looked at the sensor readings. "There's a debris field between here and our home world," he said. "The other species avoid it. Their navigation computers can't plot a safe course through the chaos." Kate smiled. "Good thing we're not relying on computers then." She turned to her helmsman, Jack Torres, ready to do some old-fashioned flying. Jack cracked his knuckles. "Like threading a needle in the dark. My favorite kind of challenge." The fleet moved out, accelerating to their maximum safe speed. They had modified Earth's engines as best they could, but they were still slower than most alien ships. Every minute counted. The debris field appeared ahead of them, 12 hours later. It was a graveyard of ancient ships and asteroids, all spinning in unpredictable patterns. The Arbiter's ship stopped at its edge. "We will observe your attempt from here," it transmitted. "The field has claimed many advanced ships. Your primitive vessels have no chance." Kate looked at her crew, then at Elder Tom. "Hold tight, everyone. Jack, take us in, just like we practiced." Jack's hands moved across his controls, guiding the massive ship through the deadly dance of debris. He didn't rely on computers. He watched, felt, and reacted. Behind them, the other ships followed his lead, their human pilots doing what machines couldn't, improvising. A massive chunk of ancient hull spun toward them. Jack rolled their ship, the movement smooth despite their size. "A little close," he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. Hours passed. Warning alarms blared as debris scraped against their hulls. The new coating held, sealing any scratches instantly. Some ships took hits, but none fell behind. The human pilots worked together, calling out warnings and sharing safe routes. Near the field's center, disaster struck. A piece of debris the size of a small moon emerged from the chaos, spinning directly into their path. There was no time to plot a new course. "All ships, emergency scatter," Kate ordered. But Jack didn't move their ship. "Wait," he said, eyes fixed ahead. "There's a pattern. The big one spins 4 times, then drifts left. If we time it right." Kate trusted her pilot. "All ships, hold formation. Prepare to accelerate on my mark." They watched the massive debris spin. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now. The fleet surged forward as the debris drifted left, passing through the gap with barely meters to spare. Behind them, the Arbiter's ship had moved closer, its energy form pulsing rapidly with what might have been surprise. When they finally cleared the debris field, a cheer went up through the fleet. They had done what the advanced species said was impossible, using skill and instinct instead of complex computers. "How?" Elder Tom asked, his form bright with amazement. "How did you know it would work?" Kate smiled. "We didn't, but sometimes you have to trust your people and take the chance." The fleet regrouped and continued toward the Mist's dying world. They had overcome one major obstacle, but the real challenge still lay ahead. They had to evacuate millions of crystal beings from a planet that was literally falling apart. But after what they'd just accomplished, Kate knew one thing for certain: never underestimate humans who set their minds to helping others. The rescue mission was about to enter its most dangerous phase. The Mist's home world came into view, and gasps echoed through the fleet's communication channels. Deep cracks ran across the planet's surface like broken glass, glowing with the angry red light of the dying core beneath. The once beautiful crystal cities now stood dark and empty, their inhabitants gathered in emergency shelters. "How long?" Commander Kate asked, looking at the readings. "The core is destabilizing faster than predicted," Elder Tom replied, his crystalline form dimming. "Perhaps 3 days, not 2 weeks as we hoped." More alien ships had arrived to watch, creating a ring of advanced vessels around the dying planet. None offered to help. They simply observed, their powerful sensors recording what they called the inevitable failure of primitive human effort. Kate opened a channel to the fleet. "This changes nothing. We came to help, and that's what we're going to do. Begin evacuation sequence." The human ships descended through the cracking atmosphere, their new hull coating protecting them from the intense heat rising from the planet's wombs. They landed in pre-planned zones, transforming into temporary shelters with their newly designed atmospheric systems. Inside the lead ship's control room, Kate watched the first group of Mist refugees approach. They moved quickly but carefully, their crystal bodies reflecting the red glow from the cracks in the ground. Each step had to be perfect. One wrong move could shatter a Mist's delicate form. "First group aboard," Jack reported from his station. "Atmosphere is stabilizing. They're safe." But as the evacuation continued, the planet's condition worsened. New cracks appeared hourly, some large enough to swallow entire buildings. The ground shook constantly now, making each rescue more dangerous than the last. "Ship 3 reporting heavy damage," a voice crackled over the radio. "We can't maintain stability in this zone." Kate made a quick decision. "Redirect those refugees to us. We'll take more than capacity." "That exceeds safety protocols," the Arbiter transmitted from orbit. "Your ships cannot handle such numbers." Kate ignored the warning. The ship's atmospheric systems were working better than expected, and she trusted her crew to manage. They had come too far to start playing it safe now. Hour after hour, the evacuation continued. The human crews worked without rest, helping Mist families aboard, calming frightened children, finding space for everyone. When the ship's halls filled, they converted storage rooms and even engine maintenance bays into refugee spaces. Then the first major quake hit. The ground split open between a group of refugees and Ship 7. Hundreds of crystal beings were trapped, the path to safety gone. "We can't reach them," Ship 7's captain reported. "The gap's too wide." From the back of Kate's bridge came a quiet voice. "Yes, we can." It was Mike, one of the maintenance workers. He pointed to the emergency construction materials they'd brought along. "We can build a bridge. Right now. By hand." The Arbiter's voice cut in. "The atmospheric conditions will kill any human who steps outside." "Then we'll wear suits," Mike replied, already heading for the airlock. "Better us risking our lives than them losing theirs." Kate nodded. "Do it." What followed was a testament to human determination. In suits that barely protected them from the deadly atmosphere, human crews from 3 ships worked together, laying down metal plates and securing them with emergency welding tools. The ground continued to shake, but they didn't stop. 40 minutes later, a makeshift bridge stretched across the gap. The trapped Mists hurried across while the humans held it steady, every moment risking their lives as the planet died beneath them. "Impossible," the Arbiter transmitted. "Your species continues to defy logic." Elder Tom watched from the bridge, his form glowing brightly. "No," he replied. "They continue to show us what compassion truly means." But even as the last of that group reached safety, worse news arrived. The planet's core had entered its final phase of collapse. They still had thousands of mists to evacuate, and now they had less than a day to do it. The real test of humanity's determination was about to begin. The planet's death throes shook every ship. Massive crystal spires, once the pride of the Mist's civilization, crashed into the growing chasms. The sky had turned blood red from the core's radiation, and the ground was breaking apart faster than anyone could track. Core collapse in 4 hours, the science officer reported. Maybe less. Commander Kate looked at the numbers on her screen. They had evacuated nearly 80% of the Mist population, but thousands remained in the deepest shelter, built inside an ancient crystal mine. It was the most stable structure left, but now it was also the most difficult to reach. "We can't land any more ships," Jack said, fighting the controls as another quake rocked them. "The ground's too unstable." Engineer Mike stepped forward, his face still bearing marks from his earlier rescue work. "The maintenance tunnels," he said, pointing to a map. "They were built to link the mine to the surface. If we can clear them." "Too dangerous," Elder Tom interrupted. "The tunnels are narrow and half-collapsed. And the radiation levels. How many of your people are down there?" Kate asked quietly. "Almost 4,000. Mostly children and their guardians." Kate stood up. "Mike, get your team ready. We're clearing those tunnels." The Arbiter's ship, still watching from orbit, transmitted immediately. "You cannot succeed. Our calculations show the radiation will kill any human who enters those tunnels before they can complete the rescue. This is beyond even your species' capacity for illogical heroism." Kate switched off the transmission. "Anyone who wants to stay behind can do so," she told her crew. No shame in it. Not a single person moved. They landed as close to the tunnel entrance as they dared. Teams of humans in radiation suits began clearing debris, working in short shifts to minimize exposure. The Mists who were already safe helped where they could, their crystal bodies more resistant to the radiation. 3 hours until core collapse. They reached the first major cave-in. The ceiling had dropped, leaving the gap barely large enough for someone to crawl through. Mike went first, dragging emergency lighting and breathing equipment. 2 hours until core collapse. They found the survivors, huddled in the mine's great crystal chamber. The sight of the human rescuers sent a wave of light through their dimmed forms. Hope, literally glowing in the darkness. "The tunnel's too narrow for everyone to get out in time," Mike reported back. We need another way." That's when they heard it, a cracking sound from above. The chamber's ceiling, weakened by the planet's convulsions, was starting to give way. Mike looked at the support beams they'd brought, then at the ceiling, then at the frightened faces of the Mist children. He made his decision. "Everyone out. Now," he ordered, starting to set up the supports. "I'll hold it until the last group is through." "Mike." "No." Kate's voice crackled through his radio. "The radiation levels. Already took too much getting here," he replied calmly. "Won't survive anyway. Might as well make it count." What followed was a desperate race. The Mists moved as fast as they safely could through the tunnel while Mike held the chamber together, adding supports as pieces of the ceiling came down. His radiation suit was torn, but he kept working. 1 hour until core collapse. The last group of Mist children made it through. Mike's legs had stopped working, but his arms kept moving, holding up the final support beam. Through his fading vision, he saw a small Mist child wave to him before being hurried away. He smiled. The chamber collapsed. On the surface, the last refugees were loaded into the ships. Elder Tom's form glowed with both joy and sadness as he looked at the final count. "We got everyone out," he said softly. "Everyone except." Kate placed a hand on his crystal shoulder. He knew what he was choosing. We all did. The ships lifted off as the ground crumbled beneath them. Behind them, the only home the Mists had ever known began its final collapse. In orbit, even the Arbiter's ship was silent. 1 year after the evacuation, Earth had changed. Crystal cities now rose alongside human ones, their spires catching sunlight and sending rainbow patterns dancing across the ground. Where most humans saw empty deserts, the mists saw perfect places for their crystalline communities to grow. Commander Kate walked through one such city, now called New Haven, with Elder Tom. Children played in the streets, human kids running and laughing while mist children glowed with joy, their forms sparkling in the sunlight. "Your world has given us more than just a home," Elder Tom said, his form glowing warmly. "It has given us hope again." They stopped at a new monument in the city center. A crystal spire rose from the ground, but unlike the others, this one had been shaped to look like a human figure holding up a collapsing ceiling. At its base, written in both human languages and the mist's light patterns, was a simple message: "For Mike and all those who risk everything to help others." The Arbiter's ship still visited regularly, along with vessels from other advanced species, but they no longer came to observe failure. They came to study something they had forgotten: the power of helping others without expecting anything in return. "The galaxy is changing," Elder Tom said, gesturing to a news display showing the latest headlines. Other species had begun offering aid to civilizations in need. Some were even working to combine their advanced technology with humanity's compassionate approach. Kate smiled. Sometimes people just need to be reminded of who they can be. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message. Kate's communicator lit up with a priority signal from Earth's new deep space monitoring network, the one built with help from the Mist's crystal technology. "We're receiving a distress call," the operator reported. "A solar flare has damaged a colony ship from the Meridian system. They're stranded, losing power. The advanced species say rescue would be too risky." Kate and Elder Tom shared a knowing look. "How long until our ships can reach them?" Kate asked. 8 hours at maximum speed." "But Commander, the radiation levels in that system." "Start warming up the engines," she ordered. "And call Dr. Cole at the Science Center. Between human ingenuity and mist crystal technology, we'll figure out a way." Elder Tom's form brightened. "I will inform my people. Many will volunteer to help." As they hurried to the launch facility, they passed a classroom where human and mist teachers worked together, sharing knowledge from both civilizations. On the wall hung a picture drawn by one of the children, a simple sketch showing crystal beings and humans holding hands under a bright sun. The rescue ships, now improved with crystal technology, waited on their launch pads. They were no longer just Earth vessels or mist vessels. They represented something new, a combination of both cultures, built for one purpose: helping those in need. "You know," Kate said as they watched the crews prepare, "a year ago, everyone said we were too primitive to help you. And now the galaxy calls Earth the shelter world." Elder Tom replied, "The place where hope lives." The ships lifted off one by one, carrying human determination and mist wisdom into the stars. In orbit, several advanced vessels watched them depart. But this time, the Arbiter's transmission was different. "We will accompany you," it said. Perhaps there is still much we can learn from each other." As Earth grew small behind them, Kate thought about how much had changed. Humanity had taken its first real steps into the galaxy, not through conquest or advanced technology, but through the simple act of helping others. The stars stretched out before them, full of possibilities. Somewhere out there, someone needed help. And now, when they called, they would get an answer. This is Earth. We're on our way. The legacy of that first rescue had become something greater than anyone imagined, a reminder to the galaxy that true civilization isn't measured by the power of its technology, but by the strength of its compassion. And that was just the beginning.